our studio in Columbus, Ohio with Rebel Financial. I hope you guys are having a good start to October. We are going to go over our monthly book review. This month we did Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent by Isabel Wilkerson, one of Oprah's book club lists, and definitely a great read. As Tony pointed out, she was well known before.
So Isabel Wilkerson, she wrote her first book, Warmth of Other Suns, about the great migration of black people up from the south to the north. So she told 3 specific stories. I read that twice. That came out in 2010. So this is her second book, which has come out this year. And as you said, once you get on Oprah's list, you're off the charts in terms of sales and stuff. So.
Right. And so, obviously this book is timely. I thought it was a great read. I have to say, unfortunately, it's few and far between where I just get a book, like a nonfiction book that just makes me want to read more and more and faster. And this was one of them. So it tells a great story. It's written well. It's a tough pill to swallow right now because I think with everything that's going on, divisiveness in our country. But a lot of things like that make it more important.
Yeah.
Right?
It was a very good read, and as I pointed out, at times it was tough just because of the stories. As we get into this, that will make more sense. But yeah, but
it's cringeworthy, almost like when you watch those shows and you feel bad or embarrassed for somebody or something. Anyways, let's dig in. Why is it important? And I think the name, obviously, Caste. I think that's one of the things that she addresses first off. There's a lot of people that just say so-and-so's racist or it's racism. And I think one of her main things is this is bigger and different than that. It's more systemic, and it was built as a system of superiority and inferiority. And unfortunately in our country, built across racial lines, right? So obviously it has to deal with race, but it's bigger than that, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting because when I saw a review of this, she doesn't use the word racism one time, right? And we think of caste, I do immediately think of India. And I think everybody defaults to that because they have acknowledged systems, so to speak. But here, a way to look at our problems are caste. And I do think that people kind of position themselves, or maybe just position other people, on where they are in a hierarchy of human beings, and that is what she gets down to is really the bigger problem.
And it's about power, when it comes down to it. But I think a lot of times people will say a lot of things and push money and power, but money is just another ends to power in a capitalistic society, right? And so it's those with it and those without it. And a caste system can be a very efficient way of controlling that, and who has it, and not very meritocratic, necessarily practically giving it to those that are most worthy, right? And so, for more arbitrary reasons, I think there's multiple times in there where they go over, race is a really bad way, to segregate people, because it does a horrible job of predicting who's the best or the worst, and who deserves power, would be good to other people, etc. We've even proven that genomically, right? So.
Well, I was just going to point out, it's just easy. It's the easiest thing to do because the lowest caste you could, are going to be black people, and you're going to make your way up off a skin chart, so to speak, and it's just easier to do. Unlike in India, where it's not as easy because colors are a lot less contrary, that it's actually talked about, where are you from, what caste, so. But anyway, that has unfortunately made it easy.
So we're going to breeze through this. I think riveting to me, even though it was not necessarily welcome or comforting, was to really kind of hear a little bit of the revisionist history of how our country was founded, and this was inculcated into how pretty much everything was formed ever since the first batch of slaves were sold into the country, and then it became, economically really tied in with our success. And then, of course, if you're really religious, because our country was really based on very Protestant, type things, is, as a religious person that believes in God and Jesus and stuff, how do you rationalize this?
Yeah.
One person doing something like that to another person,
Yeah.
when you're supposed to be godly, right? And it goes through all the stories of how they did that and what. So again, we're not going to get into all the details. You should read the book. But when it comes up, and it did get into the history of paralleling between India, and learning a little bit more about that. But then helping people that wouldn't necessarily think that this is a part of American history or culture to say, oh my gosh, there are a lot of similarities here in what's going on. And then I'll let you hit into this, but one of the things that kind of blew my mind was like the eugenics era and how the Nazis took what we had done.
Right, that they looked to us to start. Of course, that was the beginning. The Nazis came to power. They were looking to exterminate and get rid of the Jews and cast, slowly but surely, right? It finally came to getting rid of them completely. But they looked to the United States on how we cast people, and what they could do to try to learn from us and how we did it. And there was a story about how the more radical Nazis were disappointed that they, in the end, did not go as far often as we had gone.
A lot of the Nazi Party was like, "Oh my God, America's here. We can't go that far."
Right. And it wasn't about. This was before, of course, concentration camps and things like that. It was what you were doing, the rules that were being put in place. If you were a German citizen, you couldn't have sex, you couldn't marry a Jew, and so it was just, things like that is where and how they learned from us and how it was
We
done.
were the only legal precedent, of how we had papers and laws and precedents in court, etc. So it was like their way of being able to legitimize it. And then looking, again, continuing the history, the Civil War and Reconstruction and how things try to change, and how things even got worse because after the federal government in the North kind of stepped out, the South in the past, at least, when there was slavery, they had an economic incentive to at least treat people, their property, to not lose value. And after that ended, they hated them. And then no economic incentive. Yeah. And so that things got worse, right, for a while, until the civil rights movement. And it still is not good, right? That's the whole point of this, right?
And it's, and I think I got this from her earlier book. We talk about the caste system, like up north, before like the migration of black people, whether it was Jews or Italians or Irish, there was always a group that was the lowest rung, and you didn't want to be there.
Right.
And so then it just became easier for them. You have all these people coming from Europe, from different places, that all of a sudden became white, right? They never saw themselves as white. Yeah. They always saw themselves as being from the country that they are. But when they came here,
or a peasant versus a merchant versus
or the hierarchy, right? Another caste system,
an aristocrat.
Right? But when they came here, that's when it just made white people assimilate easier, because now that you had more black people migrating, the black people were pushed to the bottom, and there was more merging.
This is kind of out of order, but it goes along with that. One of the interesting things that they talked about in there, and I had never understood this, is there are a lot of African descent that are foreign that they try to distinguish themselves from African Americans. Because it makes them seem like another rung above, versus having been from the United States, indigenously or generationally, and so it just kind of blows your mind about like how even people will fight with each other just to get another rung above inside of the caste system. So we had debated about whether to go over. She has 8 pillars of caste. We could name them real fast as you can see them, but, we don't want to make this too incredibly long and get into minutia, but, divine will and the law of nature, number 1, heritability, number 2, endogamy and control of marriage and mating, number 4, purity versus pollution, number 5, occupational hierarchy, 6, dehumanization and stigma. 7, terror as enforcement, cruelty as a means of control. And 8, inherent superiority versus inherent inferiority. So, I mean, it's interesting. This is not a book that's like sitting there trying to like rile people up to fight more, right? It's like saying, hey, let's take a step back, let's look from this, let's acknowledge it. And then, what we'll get into, kind of as we wrap up, I think is always an important thing when you talk about stuff like this, which are the stories.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I'll let you go ahead and start with one of them, Tony.
So I will start. Well, I guess there's not one. I'm going to start with the end of her book because she told a story about how she had a plumber, and he was, a white guy, so he saw himself as a different caste. And so he was not very friendly, and she broke the ice. She found common ground. They had both lost their mothers. And before the end of it, it went from him being somebody who didn't want to be there to help her to somebody that was really enjoying conversation and enjoying her. And it's always interesting to me to say, I think so many of us just surround ourselves in, who our caste, so to speak, that you don't think about the other caste, and you mentally, you do put yourself above them no matter what. And sometimes, that's what's the lesson I took from this is that you need to break away from it, and especially it's incumbent, I think, more so on white people who are a higher caste and need to take the step and to break it. Of course, that's why I'm jumping way ahead now, but
yeah. So I mean, like, obviously, I think that's one of the things that makes things like racism or caste, or even like what the military tries to do to increase our kill ratio, or so, is dehumanize people, because it's a lot more difficult to do bad things to other people when you see them as a human being, or someone that's like someone that you actually care about, or has the same problems, and so empathy, sympathy, etc. So I think that's where that story goes to, is she was really frustrated and had lost her son and her husband, and found a way to connect with that guy to where he finally would help her and see her as a person. Another story was there was a young girl in Germany that was obviously, of like Caucasian descent or whatso, but she was a little bit darker, she had curly hair, and her schoolmates and the Nazi society like really came down on her, and their family had to prove their like heritage and whatso, and her grandkids ended up finding pictures of her where they were measuring her face and her eyes, and whatso, and it's just like obviously that's an extreme example, but it's true.
And one of the points of it too, they had, the point of that is they had by that time gotten rid of a lot of Jews. And so now it's like, well, now we still have to do this caste. And so now it's like, who's the purest German? Because now we've got to segment those that aren't. What's the hierarchy now? So the point is, for a lot of people, that they're looking for a caste or needing it, and there's always going to be the lowest. Someone's looking to put somebody on the lowest rung, no matter what the situation is. And because she was a little darker, she had to work harder to prove that she was a German citizen. I mean, crazy, when probably years before that it would have been a no-brainer. But now, with a lot less Jews, they had to find a lower rung.
So there's a lot of hard stories in there. Like, I think one of the ones that, is more of the tragic was retelling the story of the slave with his master being in a debate with another plantation owner, and he said, so-and-so is, so religious, he'd rather die before, saying anything against God or whatso. And so the other guy's like, no, that's bunk, it wouldn't happen, prove it.
But the other slave owner was saying, no, there's no way a slave's going to go to heaven, and he doesn't have that much faith.
Right. And so then they ended up whipping him to see if they could get him to like go back against
to renounce Jesus.
And eventually he died, right? Just to like prove almost like an argument point.
Because he would not
like
renounce. All he had to do was denounce, act like he was denouncing his faith, and he wouldn't do it. And for that, the slave owner took a lot of pride in saying that, look, my slave didn't denounce his faith. I had to even kill him to prove the point. I mean, crazy.
Well, and so we have a lot of other stories here. I think probably maybe the last one we'll end on And of course, she tells it way better than we could, because it actually happened to her on an airplane, one day, of basically not being treated well multiple times. Even one of the people that had not even treated her well was the African American steward, right? So really nice to everybody else, not nice to her for obvious reasons. And then when it came time to get down bags, this big guy got down one for this lady that was sitting right next to her, but then his bag was behind her, and so he wouldn't get hers out of the way or wait for her to get out of the way. He actually like pinned her against the seat, and when she complained, did it harder, right? And nobody stood up and said anything. And then, it was even kind of like violated in terms of body space. And then, of course, when he got off the plane, after nobody said anything, he even just, in a mocking way said, sorry.
Yeah. You're saying
because like you
nicer.
can't, you obviously you can't do anything about this, and I can do what I want to.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that gets into like kind of the main takeaways that I got from this. And I'll skip to the last one because it goes with that story. Was that one of her points were that you're never really going to break a caste system unless the people that are at the top recognize it and stop other people from doing it. And I think you're starting to see that the last decade or two, and I think maybe that's why there's such a backlash, like with the Make America Great thing. Like great, like almost every year we've been going for the last 20 or 50 years, this year's better than it's ever been in the past in terms of better prosperity, less people dying, better medicine, more jobs. Like things have been better. So when we say, make it great again, what is wrong with it? Right? And I think the thing that's wrong with it is there is a decent amount of people around the country that, would be perceived to be in the higher caste. Maybe they say, well, they're progressives or this or that are saying, no, this is not okay.
Right.
And now you're getting, and especially after we had Obama, I mean, like, if this is true, which I absolutely believe that it is, that was like a huge slap in terms of saying our system's broken.
Somebody from the lower
people are
caste
not on the bottom where they should be.
Right.
We got to put them back in their place.
Right.
And so again, it comes full circle around kind of to the beginning, where it's like the distinguishment between racism and caste system is, there are obviously like rabid racist, like horrible people out there, but there's also a lot more people that wouldn't consider themselves racist, but they are a part of the caste system. It gives them a certain amount of security. It is safety, and it is the way that it's always been.
Right.
And so to lose that means losing power, losing security. And while they may not want to go do anything to anybody individually, they're perpetuating that system that enables the worst people, right, to do the more bad things. And so I think a lot of times when people are saying we need to make things great again, I think what they're saying is we need to like reinforce this caste system, whether they understand it or not. I mean, Tony and I were talking before, a lot of the main people that need to read this will never read this, or they won't get through the first chapter. And that's the sad thing of, what's it called? Confirmation bias. We want to read and do things that confirm our pre-existing beliefs, not anything that could challenge us and probably make you a better person.
Oh, and I think the majority of people in outside of the lower caste, they're going back to the airplane story, were probably not comfortable what was happening, but they weren't saying anything.
Right.
They weren't. Here was a guy who was obviously trying to take advantage of his situation and embarrass her and make her uncomfortable, but nobody was willing to stand up to that.
Maybe even like it was almost, getting into that where it's a little bit of sexual assault too.
Right.
So anyways, I think the main takeaways from this is that, for me, and I think most people would agree if they would actually read and take a hard look at things, is there absolutely is a caste system in the United States. Number two, for me, I'm all for, political freedom, and half of the things that I believe in are kind of more right libertarian, like smaller government, less spending, etc. But to me, I could not understand the Trump movement. Like, it blew my mind because it's not rational from anything that I was thinking. Is like, why do people support him so much when he just lies? And like, I'm ex-military. Like, there's no way that, after what he said about McCain and stuff like that, no way. Like, it's not honorable. There's no integrity. And so again, I'm not trying to be political. Like, I really respect Romney and Kasich, and I think we do need more fiscal austerity, and we do need to embrace some of the good traditional values that we have that are actually good, But I just couldn't understand, and this book helped me to understand why a lot of the people are voting against their economic interests for something I don't know why, And this helped me to say, this is the reason why. It put things back into like rationalism for me. I was missing a variable, and this was it.
They're looking to protect their own and their caste,
and they may not even understand it. They just say, yes, there's something wrong with our country.
Yeah.
It's like this feeling, this insecurity, and jobs have been going away, and then that's another insecurity on another insecurity, right? And they're saying, this person's going to bring things back to where I felt more secure, even though it's not making our country better.
Right. Well, and when we look at the lower caste, and again, this is, black folks, they die at an earlier age, females, there's a gap between white females and black females, and same with men, and income and jobs, joblessness, and things like that. And the federal government really in the past, and I don't mean to get off on this, has really done things, to exclude the lower caste. But there has been things done within the government to do that, and so that has, I hope that's not what people are thinking. We need to do things like that, but you are right. I mean, it gives you a sense of why people who really need protection for pre-existing conditions and good health care will vote against their own interests, because they're really not voting against their own interests. This being in their caste and security, the safety net, for them is the biggest interest.
And it kind of made me sad, and I'm still kind of coping with it, because obviously I served and, thought of myself as, kind of a patriot and want to hold up the American ideals, and I respect all the people that died for us to give us our freedoms and to make our country, great. And one of the things that I think about is like this whole thing, and I think it's why a lot of people will fight against, that America is racist, right? This is because it tarnishes us almost from the beginning of our history. But I think the thing is that our country was built on good ideals, and it is a great country, and it stands for awesome things. It built into something awesome, but I think it's like an opportunity. I think we're going through it, and it's very painful, of making all those awesome ideals that were written in the Constitution, et cetera, apply to all people.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can really move forward together instead of divided, and with our unprecedented wealth in the world, maybe be able to do some good,
right,
rather than just waste it like we are these days, fighting against each other for, it's not non-trivial, but it's not a good thing to be wasting our resources on.
Right.
We are wasting
Yeah.
to hold other people down.
Yeah, and by holding other people down, we as a country are not moving and appreciating as fast as we can be and doing well.
Right. We're supposed to, at one point we're looked at as the leader of the free world, and I think that's laughable now. And it's not like we couldn't get back there. But it is. So thanks for joining in to us. We hope this is, it's obviously a harder, more somber subject, but it's an important one. Obviously, even with our kids and stuff, people need to learn lessons to help them grow, and they're not always just pats on the back. Right? So join us next week. Tony's going to be interviewing Stephanie Caballas Merkel from Dress for Success. And then the week after that, we have our financial planning subject, which is going to be the continuing pandemic, because obviously there's a lot of uncertainty going on with that. Doesn't look like we're going to get any more stimulus. There could be a second wave, there may not be. And then you throw the election on top of there and all that uncertainty. We're going to talk about, what can you do if you're impacted? What can you do if you're not as impacted and you're benefiting the opportunities that are available? The next week will be off, but then the next week after that, We're going to have our next book review, which, since we took a harder, more somber subject, we're going to try to do a motivating, kind of uplifting.
Lift ourselves up.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And so we're going to do one of Zig Ziglar's book, How to Stay Motivated, Changing the Picture. So one of my favorite motivational speakers from the past, a really great guy. I mean, even listening to a lot of these books, it's a compilation of him reading or doing his own presentations, can really help you. And a lot of us, I think we need that right now, because there isn't as much to be happy or proud about. But we're still awesome people. You're still awesome. We can still do great things, and sometimes you need somebody to tell it to you. So read that book with us, and we'll do that in a month or so from now. So thanks for tuning in. Hope you have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
Have a great weekend, everybody.